over the moon with that woman.
I will be his #1 fan, cheering him on for the rest of this lifetime, so.
After 10 years of marriage, Jelly Roll and Bunnie Xo are going their separate ways.
There is a version of Jelly Roll that millions of people think they know. They have seen the tattoos, heard the music, watched the tears on award show stages, and followed every chapter of what looks like one of the most remarkable comeback stories in modern music history. But here is the thing about stories told from the outside: they are almost always incomplete. The person who actually knows what happened behind every closed door, every quiet night, and every moment the cameras were not rolling, is someone who has rarely said everything she knows. That person is Bunnie Xo. And recently, she opened up in a way that changes how you see everything. She did not do it for attention. She did not do it to start drama or fuel headlines. She did it because after years of watching the world build an image of a man she knows more deeply than almost anyone alive, she felt that the real story deserved to be told. Not the polished version. Not the highlight reel. The actual truth about who Jason DeFord is when nobody is watching, when the stage lights go dark, and when life gets heavy in ways that fame cannot fix. What she revealed is not scandalous. It is something far more powerful than that. It is deeply human. And once you hear it, you will never look at Jelly Roll quite the same way again. Before we talk about what Bunnie revealed, it is important to understand who she is, because too many people still see her only through the lens of her marriage. That is a mistake. Bunnie Xo, born Alyssa DeFord, was already carving out her own space in the media world long before she ever became part of Jelly Roll's story. She grew up without the safety net of industry connections or family fame. Everything she built herself, one honest conversation at a time. Her path into public life started with a genuine desire to connect with people in a real way. She had a personality that did not fit neatly into any box, too honest for traditional media, too layered to be dismissed as just another online personality. She built a following by simply being herself, and in a world full of curated images and carefully managed personas, that authenticity became her greatest strength. When she launched her podcast, the Dumb Blonde Podcast, it was not just another interview show. It became a space where people felt safe enough to say the things they had never said publicly before. Guests came in expecting a casual conversation and left having shared things they had kept hidden for years. That was not an accident. That was the result of Bunnie's rare ability to make people feel genuinely seen and genuinely heard. She had a gift for getting to the truth without making people feel exposed or attacked. Week after week, she sat across from musicians, writers, public figures, and everyday people with extraordinary stories. She listened to pain and triumph in equal measure. She asked the questions that most interviewers are too afraid to ask, and she did it with a warmth that made people want to answer honestly. Over time, that consistency built her something rare in the entertainment world: real trust. But here is the part that most people overlook. While she was building all of that, while she was becoming known for drawing out the hidden truths in other people's lives, she was also living through her own story. One that was personal and complicated and rich with moments that never made it onto any podcast. Her own life was full of the exact kind of depth and quiet struggle that she so often helped others articulate. And at the center of that story was a man the world thought it already understood. They met in Las Vegas in 2015. Jelly Roll was performing, and Bunnie was in the crowd. At that point in his life, he was not the headline act that fills arenas today. He was still grinding, still fighting for every opportunity, still trying to convince an industry that was not entirely convinced. After the show, they crossed paths and talked, and something about that conversation stayed with both of them. There was a comfort between them, a naturalness that is hard to manufacture and impossible to fake. The timing was not right at first. Bunnie was in a relationship, and so they went their separate ways. But the impression they made on each other did not disappear. When circumstances changed, they found their way back into each other's orbit, and what had started as a brief connection began to grow into something real and lasting. What makes the foundation of their relationship so significant is what was happening in Jelly Roll's life during that time. He was not living in any kind of comfort or security. He was moving between places, struggling financially, trying to keep his music dream alive through sheer determination. Most people, if they were being honest, would have seen someone in that situation and made a practical decision to keep their distance. The math did not look promising from the outside. But Bunnie did not see the math. She saw the person. She recognized something in him that had nothing to do with where he was at that moment and everything to do with where he was capable of going. She saw talent that had not yet found its full audience, emotional depth that most people never took the time to notice, and a sincerity that cut through every surface-level impression. At one point, She offered him a place to stay while he worked on music in Las Vegas. It was a simple gesture, but in the context of everything he was carrying at the time, it meant the world. She believed in him before he was easy to believe in. That is the foundation their relationship was built on. Not fame. Not money. Not the version of Jelly Roll that would later stand on stages in front of tens of thousands of people. She chose the version that was still figuring it all out, and she chose him without hesitation. By 2016, their bond had grown strong enough that Jelly Roll made a decision that surprised even the people closest to him. During a live performance in Las Vegas, he stopped the show and proposed to Bunnie right there on stage, in front of the crowd, with music still in the air. It was not a perfectly choreographed moment. There was no elaborate setup or movie-worthy backdrop. It was raw and real and completely in keeping with who both of them actually are. And then they did something that said even more about their relationship than the proposal itself. Within hours of that moment, they were at a courthouse in Las Vegas, saying their vows. No months of planning. No waiting for the perfect circumstances. Just two people who knew what they wanted and moved toward it without overthinking. That decisiveness, that willingness to commit fully without waiting for everything to be ideal, would define how they approached everything that came after. The years that followed were not always easy. No relationship that is actually real ever is. They faced pressure that most couples never have to deal with, the demands of a growing career, the complexity of building a blended family, the weight of personal histories that do not simply disappear because things are going well. But through all of it, they stayed connected in a way that people around them could feel, even if they could not fully explain it. In 2023, they returned to Las Vegas and renewed their vows at the same place where they had started. It was a quiet moment, not designed for public consumption, but a genuine recommitment to everything they had built and survived together. For people who had followed their story, it felt like a powerful statement. Here were two people who had been through enough to walk away, choosing instead to walk forward together. Now here is where Bunnie's recent words become so important. Because even with all of that history, even with everything the public thought they knew about Jelly Roll and Bunnie as a couple, she has said clearly that the version of him that exists in public perception is only a fraction of who he actually is. The man she describes privately is someone who has carried an enormous emotional weight for most of his adult life. Not just the weight of a difficult past, which is well documented and something he has spoken about openly, but the ongoing weight of trying to be better every single day. She has talked about watching him wrestle with the gap between who he was and who he wanted to be, not in a dramatic or performative way, but in the quiet, daily, unglamorous way that real growth actually happens. She watched him work at his relationship with his daughter Bailey in a way that never made the news because it was not the kind of thing that generates headlines. It was made of small moments, showing up when it would have been easier not to, having difficult conversations that had no perfect outcome, sitting with discomfort rather than running from it. She saw him try to rebuild and repair things that had been broken before fame gave him any kind of platform, and she saw how seriously he took that responsibility even when nobody was applauding him for it. Bunnie stepped into the role of stepmother without anyone asking her to transform herself or take on something she was not prepared for. She grew into it, carefully and with intention. Her relationship with Bailey became one of the most meaningful parts of her life, and watching Jelly Roll navigate fatherhood in real time gave her a window into a part of him that the stage persona never captures. He was not just trying to be a better artist. He was trying to be a better father. And that effort, she has said, was real and consistent in a way that moved her deeply. There is another chapter of their life together that Bunnie has spoken about with real vulnerability, and it is one that a lot of people glossed over when it was happening publicly. Their journey through IVF was not a simple story with a tidy ending. It was a period filled with hope and disappointment cycling through them repeatedly, requiring a kind of emotional endurance that is genuinely hard to describe to anyone who has not lived through it. What Bunnie revealed about that time is that it showed her sides of Jelly Roll that she had not seen before. In the middle of professional success, in the middle of his career reaching heights he had worked toward his entire life, she watched him be completely present for something deeply personal and painful. She watched him hold space for grief and uncertainty without retreating into the comfort of what was going well in other parts of his life. That kind of emotional presence is not something you can perform. It is either there or it is not. She said that even when they shared parts of that journey publicly, what people saw was only a small window into what they were actually experiencing. The full weight of it, the private conversations, the quiet nights where hope felt fragile and the future felt uncertain, all of that stayed between them. And she holds that as evidence of something important about who he is when life is not cooperating and the cameras are not around to document it. Then came the announcement that nobody who had followed their story was fully prepared for. After years together, after everything they had built and survived, Bunnie Xo and Jelly Roll announced that they were separating. For people who had seen them as one of the most genuinely solid couples in the public eye, it felt like an unexpected blow. The internet did what the internet always does. Speculation spread immediately. Rumors filled the space where facts were not available. People invented narratives and assigned blame and turned a deeply personal situation into content. But both Bunnie and Jelly Roll responded in a way that said a great deal about their character. They did not feed the noise. They did not attack each other or use their platforms to score points. They denied what was false, specifically the rumors about infidelity, and they refused to turn their pain into a public spectacle. What emerged instead was something that caught people off guard. Even in the midst of separation, they continued to speak about each other with genuine warmth and respect. Bunnie referred to him as one of her closest friends. Jelly Roll said publicly that she would always hold an irreplaceable place in his life. This was not performance. These were two people who had built something real together, and even as that thing changed shape, the care underneath it did not evaporate. Bunnie has been honest about what contributed to the weight that ultimately became too much to carry together. The emotional toll of their IVF journey. The relentless demands of parallel careers that were both growing simultaneously. The accumulation of pressures that quietly pile up in any long-term relationship and can reach a tipping point that feels sudden even when it has been building for a long time. She did not frame it as one person's failure or one defining moment. She framed it as life, complicated and real and sometimes heartbreaking even when it involves people who genuinely love each other. Perhaps the most telling thing Bunnie has shared in everything she has said is not about the separation itself, but about what she observed in Jelly Roll across all those years. She has been consistent in saying that the public image of him, as inspiring and genuine as it is, still leaves out something essential. The awards and the arena shows and the emotional acceptance speeches are all real. His gratitude is real. His journey is real. But Bunnie knows the version that exists underneath all of that. The version that wakes up at 3 a.m. still carrying old guilt. The version that holds himself to a standard that no amount of external success has yet fully satisfied. The version that loves fiercely and quietly and without needing anyone to notice. She has described him as someone who is genuinely trying. Not performing effort for an audience, but actually doing the work every day to be a better person than he was the day before. And she says that even people who have followed his story closely, people who feel like they know him through his music and his interviews and his public moments, are still only seeing a reflection of the full truth. The real thing is deeper and more layered and more human than any public narrative can fully contain.